World News program coming to you live from Algiers with me, Mariam Zian, to the headlines. Algeria firmly rejects threats, vows strict reciprocity and warns of repercussions for violating the 1968 agreement. Coming up, Western Sahara condemns French Senate President's visit, and President Ghali vows to defend Sahrawi rights against colonialism. Ex-Palestinian resistance hands over 4 Israeli bodies. 641 prisoners have been released as Hamas claims victory over delays. And in Sudan, the army advances on Khartoum's presidential palace. Clashes in Al-Fashir kill over 30 Rapid Support Forces members. And A3 Plus warns of a parallel authority. Hello and welcome back to the details of our program. First, Algerian President and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, chaired a meeting of the High Council of Security on Thursday, according to a statement from the Algerian presidency. And Algeria reaffirmed its rejection of ultimatums and threats, stressing that it will respond firmly and reciprocally to any travel restrictions imposed between Algeria and France. The Algerian Foreign Ministry clarified that Algeria has not initiated any severance of ties, despite tensions sparked by the French side in bilateral relations.
Algeria firmly rejects being addressed with deadlines, warnings and threats, and will ensure the strict and immediate application of reciprocal treatment for all restrictions imposed on movement between Algeria and France. This is without ruling out any other measures that national interests may require to be enacted in the midst of the escalation and tensions that the French side has added to the relations between Algeria and France. Algeria did not initiate any form of severance, but rather allowed the French side alone to bear full responsibility on its own.
The Algerian Ministry of Foreign Affairs added that Algeria has maintained calm and balance, working towards fulfilling its duties towards its citizens residing in France. It also pointed out that all laws and bilateral and international agreements are in favor of Algeria.
Throughout this entire period, Algeria took it upon itself to maintain calm, balance, and self-restraint. In this context, it focused on a single and sole objective, which is to exercise its rights and fulfill its duties towards its citizens residing in France. The provisions of French legislation, bilateral agreements, and European and international law all align with Algeria, especially regarding the consular protection of its nationals.
And the Algerian Foreign Ministry stated in a communiqué that the breach of commitments was caused by the French side, emphasizing Algeria's commitment to its international standard and its adherence to the legal framework governing the movement of people between Algeria and France.
The breach of national and international commitments was caused by the French side, as reflected in the excessive and arbitrary use of administrative decisions aimed at deporting Algerian citizens and denying them access to legal appeals guaranteed by French legislation itself. For its part, Algeria remains committed to its international position and will continue to uphold the unified legal framework governing the movement of people between Algeria and France without selectivity or deviation from the objectives jointly defined by both countries.
And the ministry warned that any violation of the 1968 agreement would prompt a reciprocal response from Algeria. It also cautioned against the far-right taken Algerian-French relations hostage for political purposes.
Any violation of the 1968 agreement which has already been stripped of its substance and essence, will result in a reciprocal decision from Algeria regarding other agreements and protocols of a similar nature. In doing so, the hateful and extremist French far right would have succeeded in its aim of taking the Algerian-French relationship hostage and exploiting it for despicable political purposes unworthy of its stature and position.
The French diplomacy is struggling and losing its influence as the far-right movement in France is increasing its hatred towards immigrants, notably Arabs and Muslims, leading to a chaotic situation in the country, as explained by political analyst Abdel Toumi, who talked to us from Paris.
As a result of all these crises, so France diplomacy is no longer an influential country in the world and in the region. This is why we saw how, again, diplomacy was left to an ideologue, interior minister, who gets confused between being tough cop and wise diplomat. Adding to that, the political crisis that France has been going through in the last 6 months. So this is why we saw the rising of the far right and to some extent the banalization of its hatred discourse toward not only Algeria but toward all the immigrants and particularly the Arabs and the Muslims.
And speaking about the future relations between Algeria and France, Mr. Toumi stressed that the current crisis should be solved through mutual respect and restraint, recalling that Algeria is a diplomatically influential country in the region and the world and should be treated as such. Let's take a listen.
So the future of the two countries' relations is headed toward the unknown, and this is a need to settle this crisis quickly with mutual respect and appeasement. In sum, Algeria is a rising state and has positioned itself in the region and even on the world stage as a credible country, and her voice is well counted. So this is why, and France has to be careful what the far right and these ideologues in the bureau governments wish for, because Algeria has many cards to make an end to these or to their senseless provocation and blackmail. And there is a solid principle in diplomacy, it calls reciprocity.
The French government is under increasing pressure from the far right, with key figures influencing its policies toward Algeria. This shift is raising tensions, particularly over Western Sahara and the treatment of Algerian nationals. Hossam Berkan has the following report.
Paris is increasingly aligning itself with the far right, allowing figures like Gérald Darmanin and Bruno Retailleau to dictate decisions while disregarding diplomatic protocols. France's stance on several issues, especially those linked to Algeria, reflect this shift. Even in UN jurisdiction matters, this is evident in repeated French official visits to occupied Sahrawi territories, aligning with Morocco's expansionist aims, despite the UN classifying Western Sahara as a non-self-governing territory. Algerian nationals also continue to face discrimination.
Moi, je pense que ce qu'est en train de faire la France vis-à-vis de l'Algérie, c'est une bêtise rare et une faute historique.
France's approach toward Algeria is a historical mistake. The root of the crisis lies in France's recognition of Moroccan sovereignty over the occupied Sahrawi territories, in a clear violation of international law. The Western Sahara issue is being handled by UN bodies, and for Algeria, this stance is an unacceptable provocation. I believe Retailleau fails to grasp that France's colonial rule over Algeria ended long ago. Relations with Algeria cannot be dictated by the Minister of the Interior.
Observers agree that the growing dominance of the far right and the silence of the Élysée stem from its political weakness in the face of internal party conflicts. The far right is advancing rapidly, while decision-makers in Paris remain paralyzed and isolated.
This situation clearly demonstrates that the French government is now completely sidelined, with policy making dictated by the far right. President Macron is in an extremely fragile position, constantly under pressure from the far right, which repeatedly threatens to withdraw confidence from François Bayroul's government. This explains his submission to their demands.
The actions of Retailleau, Darmanin, Le Pen, and others confirm that the far right has hijacked France's official discourse, holding the Algerian-French relations hostage to serve its own narrow political agenda.
Sahrawi President and Polisario Front Secretary General Brahim Ghali has condemned what he called French attempts to disregard international legitimacy, freedom and human rights. In a speech marking the 49th anniversary of the proclamation of the Sahrawi Republic, President Ghali accused France of openly trampling on the very principles of liberty, democracy, justice and human rights that it claims to champion.
Today, it has become undeniably clear that Morocco's undertaking of this aggressive step, along with its prior efforts to legitimize the occupation through settlement expansion, resource plundering, and involving external parties in illegal activities on occupied land, was carried out with the instigation, support, and encouragement of the same colonial powers that colluded with it in the invasion of Western Sahara since October 31st, 1975. Colonial France has not hesitated, in broad daylight, to trample upon all the values and principles of freedom, democracy, justice, human rights, and international legitimacy, which it has long boasted of being the foremost defender.
The Sahrawi president reaffirmed the Sahrawi people's determination to defend their rights and land against what he described as forces complicit with Morocco's expansionist agenda.
The Sahrawi people's unwavering determination to uphold their rights, their land, and the right to self-defense, along with their legendary resilience, has compelled these powers, Morocco's sponsors and protectors, to reveal their true, ugly colonial face, one that is complicit and aligned with Morocco's expansionist agenda.
And Algeria has reaffirmed its commitment to consolidating cooperation with the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights. This was highlighted during a meeting between the Secretary General of the Algerian Foreign Ministry, Lounès Maghraman, and the UN Deputy High Commissioner for Human Rights, Nada al-Nashif, on the sidelines of the high-level segment of the 58th session of the Human Rights Council in Geneva. Mr. Maghraman also noted Algeria's decision to double its financial contribution to the Commission's budget for 2025 to support its mandated tasks. Also, the Secretary General of the Algerian Foreign Ministry, Lounès Maghraman, also discussed with the Assistant High Commissioner for Protection, Rouvendrili Minik Dioula, mechanisms aimed at enhancing coordination for optimal refugee care. According to a statement from the Algerian Foreign Ministry, Maghraman affirmed Algeria's support for the Commission's role in enhancing humanitarian assistance for Sahrawi refugees and explored ways to effectively address their concerns and aspirations. Discussions also covered bilateral cooperation in Algeria's efforts to provide favorable conditions for receiving and supporting refugees. Secretary General of the Algerian Foreign Ministry, Lounès Maghraman, reaffirmed the shared desire to continue developing cooperation between Algeria and Russia during his meeting with Sergei Vershinin, Russia's Deputy Foreign Minister for Multilateral Affairs. The two diplomats met on the sidelines of the high-level segment of the 58th session of the Human Rights Council in Geneva, where they discussed enhancing consultation and coordination between Algiers and Moscow within international and regional organizations. And Algerian Prime Minister Nadir Al-Arabawi discussed with the Director General and Chairman of the Board of the Arab Monetary Fund, Dr. Fahd bin Mohammed Al-Turki, the existing relations between Algeria and the Arab Monetary Fund, as well as various aspects of cooperation and joint activities in several financial fields. According to a statement from the Algerian Prime Minister's office, both sides highly praised the special importance President Tebboune places on enhancing joint Arab action and supporting its financial institutions. They also commended President Tebboune's call made during the Arab Summit held in Algeria in November 2022 to mobilize Arab financial resources, particularly through the Arab Monetary Fund, to assist member states in dire need of aid to help them overcome difficult circumstances. And Mauritanian President Mohamed Ould Cheikh El Ghazouani discussed the existing cooperation between Mauritania and Algeria and the growing momentum in their bilateral relations across various fields during his meeting with Algerian Minister of Public Works and Basic Infrastructure, Lakhdar Rakhrouch in Nouakchott. The meeting, held on the sidelines of the second session of the Algeria-Mauritania Joint Committee overseeing the Tindouf Zouirat Road project, provided an opportunity to inform the Mauritanian president about the progress of the project, which both countries see as crucial for strengthening communication, boosting trade, exchange, and deepening relations between the two nations. And Algeria has announced the construction of a 40-megawatt power plant in Niger as a grant, with operations set to begin in June. During a visit to Niger, Mourad Ajal, CEO of Algeria's state-owned utility, Sonalgaz, stated that President Abdelmadjid Tebboune had decided to fund the project to support Niger and improve public services. Sonalgaz signed a memorandum of understanding with Niger's electricity company on power generation, distribution, digitization, training, and equipment sales.
Yesterday marked the launch of the project to construct a 40-megawatt power generation plant in execution of the directives of the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmadjid Tebboune. The completion period of this important facility is expected to be finalized, God willing, before the end of June 2025. As for the partnership agreement concluded yesterday in 2024, it covers several areas, including electricity production, transmission and distribution, digitalization, training, and equipment sales. Through this agreement, we have embodied the entire roadmap that will follow in the coming months to advance this sector.
And the Al-Qassam brigades handed over the bodies of 4 Israeli prisoners to the International Red Cross in Khan Yunis, southern Gaza Strip, early Thursday. According to Palestinian media outlets, the handover took place at a location designated by the resistance in Khan Yunis, away from media coverage. The reports noted that Red Cross vehicles headed to the Karam Abu Salim crossing southeast of Rafah before delivering the 4 bodies to Israel. And the Zionist entity has released 641 Palestinian prisoners, including 151 serving life sentences or long-term sentences. According to Palestinian Prisoners Club, the releases included 42 prisoners from the West Bank, including occupied Al-Quds, and 97 who were deported abroad. Also, 12 prisoners from Gaza who were detained before October 7 and 444 from Gaza detained after October 7, 2023 were freed, along with 45 women and children from the Gaza Strip. The Palestinian Ministry of Health in Gaza announced on Thursday that the death toll from the Israeli aggression on the Strip has risen to 48,365, with 111,780 injured. According to the ministry statement, 17 bodies were recovered and 19 people were injured in the past 24 hours. And Algeria condemned the ongoing violations by the Zionist occupation against the Palestinian people in occupied territories. Rashid Baldhan, Algeria's permanent representative to the UN in Geneva, criticized attempts to equate the occupying power with the state of Palestine and obligations, calling it unjust, given the occupation's non-cooperation with the Human Rights Commissioner. He also reaffirmed Algeria's support for the people, or the Palestinian people's right to self-determination and an independent state.
Attempts to create a parity between the occupying power and the state of Palestine in terms of obligations and duties are incorrect and do not comply with the requirements of international law. Despite the report mentioning the advisory opinion of the International Court of Justice, and despite the occupation's refusal to cooperate with the Office of the High Commissioner in investigating all Israeli violations, Algeria strongly condemns the ongoing grave violations of international law by the Israeli occupation forces against the defenseless Palestinian people. Algeria renews its position supporting the right of the Palestinian people to self-determination and the establishment of their independent state in accordance with internationally recognized references. It also reiterates its support for the return of the inhabitants of Gaza to their homes, with guarantees for the entry of humanitarian aid without conditions or restrictions.
The Sudanese army continues its advance toward the presidential palace, sovereign institutions, and Khartoum's commercial center amid the RSF's collapse. On Thursday, it repelled the RSF drone attack on Marwi International Airport and secured positions south of Durman, including the Nakhil neighborhood, after intense battles. And in Al-Fashir, the Sudanese army stated that its forces conducted a precise operation resulting in the deaths of 30 RSF members and the injury of others, while also seizing a cache of weapons and ammunition. According to the 6th Infantry Division in Al-Fashir, the Army's Air Force carried out 3 airstrikes targeting RSF positions around Al-Fashir, killing 30 RSF members, injuring others, and destroying 9 combat vehicles. The A3+ group, comprising Algeria, Somalia, Sierra Leone, and Guyana, expressed concern about the Rapid Support Forces announcement, along with other political groups, to establish a parallel authority in Sudan. Speaking at a UN Security Council session on Sudan, Algerian diplomat Toufiq Al-Eid Qudri warned that this move could lead to further fragmentation in the country.
We express our serious concern over the announcement by the leaders of the Rapid Support Forces, alongside other movements and political factions, to establish a parallel authority in Sudan. This is a dangerous step that fuels further fragmentation in Sudan and derails ongoing efforts towards peace and dialogue. We call for these actions to be reversed and urge the RSF and their allies to put the unity and national interest of Sudan above all other considerations.
And Kenya has denied recognizing any independent entities in Sudan or anywhere else. Kenya's UN representative Erastus Lukuli said during a UN Security Council session on the situation in Sudan that President William Ruto and the Kenyan government did not recognize any independent entity in Sudan, adding that recognition of states is guaranteed by international law and stipulated in its practice, as he put it.
And I think at this point we wish to clarify that Kenya has not recognized any entity, whether in the Sudan or elsewhere. Recognition of states is a legal phenomenon, the exercise of which is provided for by international law. I reiterate that neither President William Ruto nor the government of Kenya has recognized any independent entity in the Sudan or elsewhere.
Russian-American talks on normalizing the work of diplomatic and consular missions and removing previous obstacles to Russian-American diplomatic work began in Istanbul today. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said that he does not expect easy and quick decisions between the two countries due to the complexities of the issues on the agenda of the talks, stressing that maintaining political will and mutual readiness to listen to points of view will enable Washington and Moscow to move forward in these negotiations. Russian President Vladimir Putin said on Thursday that preliminary talks between Moscow and Washington give hope for a solution to the conflict in Ukraine. Putin confirmed in a statement during a meeting of the Russian Federal Security Service that there is a mutual desire to work on restoring relations between the two countries, warning what he called Western elites who will continue, according to him, attempts to disrupt the dialogue that began with the US. And Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is visiting the US on Friday to sign rare natural resource agreement with Washington. During a stop in Ireland, he stated that the success of any agreement depends on negotiations and continued US assistance. The deal includes creating an investment fund for reconstruction in Ukraine, according to Agence France-Presse. Ladies and gentlemen, that's a wrap for tonight's program. Our platforms and news websites remain available around the clock. Thank you for watching. Have a great night.